YouTube, it's Mama Dawn, and I'm doing a small series on my channel about my life up in Alaska. This is basically just a December series to go along with the wintry theme of Christmas time. Sharing a bunch of Alaskan stories of just really unique and fun and different things that happened to me up in Alaska. And today we're talking about a very interesting one, and that is the time that I mined a secret, potentially cursed, gold mine in Alaska. So a little bit of backstory, if this is your first time to my channel, if this is the first time listening to one of my Alaskan stories, I moved out to this little tiny Yupik Eskimo village in western Alaska, very rural, very remote. I lived in Alaska for 5 years. I explored every little nook and cranny of the tundra out there, absolutely loved it, integrated myself in the Yupik culture, like miss it dearly every single day, like Alaska truly is my home. But this story is a crazy one. Okay, so out on the Yukon River where I was in the flat tundra, there are lots of these little waterways that go off of the Yukon River, and these are called sloughs, or that's what people out there call them. But basically they're like tinier rivers that lead into the big Yukon River. One particular slough that is pretty infamous in the area because a lot of salmon fish spawn in it. So it's a very popular slough. A lot of people ride up into it. It's pretty notorious for having some bears. There's really good berry picking, and of course there's great salmon fishing. There is a folklore story out where I was that talked about these two men who discovered gold on this particular slough. The story goes that these were two American explorers who came up the Yukon River looking specifically for gold. They went into this slough, they panned, they found a really rich gold spot, and they decided they were going to spend the entire winter there, mining as much gold as they possibly could, storing it up to where when summer came and the ice broke and they could sail back down to the continental US again, they would just take all of their gold with them and become very rich. What they did, they spent the entire winter there, they built themselves a little cabin, and they mined gold. And we really don't know the story of how their life was while they were out there mining gold, but it had to have been very hard. Like, the tundra is very sparse. There's not a lot of food supplies. If they brought food, they would have had to have truly rationed it. And the story goes that when spring came around and the Eskimos went to visit these two men, one of the men had died, and the other men swore that the gold had cursed them. He left all of the gold there and left town. Yupik culture in and of itself is just integrated with superstitions. They have a lot of stories, a lot of neo-pagan type beliefs that really instill in them a sense of belief in these superstitious stories. So of course the Yupik elders there said, we cannot mess around with this gold. What exactly they did with the gold that the men had already mined and left there, which supposedly they were just left in these large barrels. No one really knows what happens to those large barrels, but people do know that the Yupik elders said, we are not going to mine there. We cannot even tell the youth about this. No one can know that this gold exists. And it essentially became shut down. No one was allowed to try and mine gold in that area, and the Yupiks just prohibited their youth from even knowing that gold existed there. And of course, the story kind of seeped down over the generations of these two white men who went and mined gold and became cursed. And one died and the other one left with all of his riches just essentially left beside the river. Really, because it was so deeply ingrained in the people out there, no one went searching for that gold. There was a few white men out in the area where I was at. I was the only white woman. Everyone else was Yupik, at least like year-round residents. There were white teachers who came out and then would just leave at the end of the year. But I was the only white woman who stayed there year-round. And there was a couple white men. And one of the white men I talked to claimed that he had discovered this secret gold mine. One day in the middle of the summer, he invited me to go out with a couple other Yupik people who claimed they also went with him to this gold mine to go and see the gold mine. And we took this 2-hour boat ride up the Yukon River and into the slough. And I brought my gold pan with me, and we just drove into the slough. And originally the slough starts out very deep. It's very easy to drive your boat through, and then the further you go, the more shallow it gets, and your boat starts to hit the rocks at the bottom, and you have to get out and push your boat up to the next deep spot. And we're going just deeper and deeper into this slough where it's getting more and more shallow, and just it's becoming like a creek at that point. But we're in our boat still trying to push it up, and eventually we get to this area where there's kind of like a little bit of flat ground, and it leads up to this pretty little mountain. Beautiful area. And the creek is very, very shallow. We anchor our boat up, and the men say this is where the gold is. Or it says like the little white girl who has heard the story thinks they gotta be kidding me. Just go to like light their fire. And I'm thinking they're just gonna watch me and they're gonna laugh that I'm sitting there trying to mine this stupid rocky creek bed. And that's what it was. It was so rocky. There wasn't mud. And when you think of mining gold, you want like mud because you want to be able to shake it around. You don't want giant rocks. You're not going to find gold on giant rocks. You want mud. So I started out by kind of like reaching down into the water and pulling the big rocks out of the way and grab some mud from the bottom. To the mud is they're over there starting their campfire and throwing their rods and reels out to try and catch some fish, and I start panning. Pan, it's like this big bowl and you're kind of shaking it around and washing the dirt away, bringing some more water in, washing dirt away. And gold is so heavy that it's going to fall to the bottom of the pan. There's little ripples in the pan that will catch the gold. So you really don't know if you have any gold nuggets until you've washed away all of the mud. I'm kind of just like messing around pretty haphazardly at this point, washing away the mud, and I start to see a couple little glitters. How you know you potentially have gold if there's something sparkly in just, you know, the brown mud. So I continue washing away and I'm seeing a couple little specks. And I wash and I wash. And as I get further down, I'm seeing these specks and they're starting to really stick through the mud. And I'm like in awe. I mean, there's absolutely no way this can't be real gold. But as I get down, I've got now 4 little specks, 4 little gold nuggets, and I pick them up, and like the thing is you drop them in your hand, and if they're heavy, they're probably real gold, not fool's gold. And you can feel like a little speck, you can feel it drop into your hand because gold is so heavy. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's no way this isn't the gold. Set them aside on a rock, like these 4 little tiny pebbles, and I pull out more gold, and I go through the whole process again, and I wash it out. And once again, at the bottom of this pan, there's a little gold specks. There's little gold nuggets. Every single pan, for 5 pans of gold, had 3 or 4 tiny little nuggets in it. This is a ton. And back in the day, when these men were mining the gold in the 1800s, this would have been hundreds of dollars of gold that they were finding every single day. I'm looking at the guys who brought me out there and I'm like, you weren't kidding. This is it. There's gold here. There's so much gold here. Kind of laughed and they were like, yeah, there's gold here. I was just in such awe because I had never mined gold successfully in my life. Like I had a gold pan and I tried tons of places, you know, just thinking it's Alaska. There's going to be gold somewhere. But like finding the actual place where there is actually gold, and let alone such an amazing folkloric story behind it, was just, it blew my mind that it was real. There was really gold there. Knowing the story, I couldn't take the gold with me. I took a couple little nuggets that I sent to my grandfather in a card for Christmas, and I wrote him a poem explaining the story, and I gifted that to him. And the rest of the gold I just left and stuck back into the water. At some place in my grandparents' house, they still have that letter with the gold nuggets taped to them. So there is like proof that I got gold nuggets somewhere out there. But just the story in and of itself, the fact that I found this old, I didn't find it, I can't take credit for that, but I was able to mine this old cursed gold mine was just crazy to me. Like thinking that there were 2 men who had to have discovered in this and just felt like this is life-changing. This is like winning the lottery. They literally won the lottery with this insanely rich gold mine. And they spent all winter there. And then one of them died and the other one was so distraught by his friend's death that he just left all the riches and just ran away. And yet that gold is still there. It just makes you wonder, like, is the story of the 2 men true? You know, because the gold is there. The gold is in the slough. You know, it's definitely a place where they could have gotten. It's a place where they could have spent the winter. Is the curse true? It's so crazy. It's so crazy to think about. So crazy. But it was insane. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life to hear this story, to have heard it for a couple years, and then to kind of be told, whispered, like, we know where that gold is at. Me not believing it, following them out there, and then mining the gold and seeing those little nuggets show up. be something I never forget. A little Alaskan story for today. If you guys are interested in seeing other Alaskan stories, I'll leave a playlist in the description box below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.